Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our student panel on our college admissions workshop. This is a very special event. We will have a lot of people online, but for the first time in a long time, we also have some live audience members. So here for everyone, welcome. Thank you for coming. Shout out to them. And I'm very excited to moderate this panel today because the speakers are very special to us. And you will find in the course of this workshop why we chose these individuals to share. And a lot of times, well, first of all, let me introduce who's in the room. We have Miss Karen Kwok, sorry, Adrian, you may have to. Ms. Karen Kwok is our boarding school and college admissions counselor at Baker & Bloom. And do you want to say anything about yourself? Okay, so we'll just go through who's in the room first. And we have Ethan Look, Kimberly, Braden, Daisy, and Dr. Min Tran, who's also a college admissions counselor. And my name is Renee Bowie. I'm the founder of Baker & Bloom, and also I've been working as a boarding school and university college counselor as well. And so today we wanted to, instead of just doing our usual workshops where we share a lot of like current trends and give advice, we wanted to highlight the experience of applying from the firsthand perspective of our students. And also for them to talk a little bit about the experience of working with us as counselors, but most of all really share their individual perspectives on how they tackled this huge challenge, and also maybe what they learned from it. But we will leave a lot of room, a lot of time for questions so that you really get to interview them. And let's just get started. So first, I'd like to introduce each of you because you may be a little bit shy. So I don't want you to be shy, but let me tell you a little bit about them first. Ethan, whom I worked with I've known since he was in grade 7, I think, yes, and is very. Okay, let me get, I don't want to get into my thoughts on you right now, but a wonderful student who graduated from Choate Rosemary School, a boarding school in the US, and is headed off to, well, no, not headed off. He's already at Princeton, finished his first year at Princeton, and is considering multiple majors, including anthropology and comp lit, and he has many talents, but one of them is playwriting. And he, even at Choate, was a part of the Fringe Fest at Choate and helped organize that, and is currently also writing plays. Some of his plays have been recognized, like the Eugene O'Neill Award. He was a semifinalist. So a lot of achievement in the arts, but in particular in playwriting. And then Kimberly Wang graduated from German Swiss International School also a year ago, and will be entering Brown. She's taken a gap year, and I'm excited to also hear a bit about what she's done in the interim. And she's also thinking about different majors, but as of now, thinking of sociology as her major. And something that Kimberly's particularly good at is Chinese painting. And her paintings are truly beautiful. We really should share some of them. I share them with people all the time. And Braden, who is a graduate of St. Paul's Co-Educational College in Hong Kong, is headed off to England, to UCL, and to study something related to business, but in particular, I think you're still debating what in particular, but business is the general area. And I think is there anything you wanted to share about what you've been doing recently in terms of but special talents and so on?
So, hi everyone. I'm Braden, and I'm going off to UCL. Actually, I'm still debating, but I do want to do something that is related to business, whether it's in law form and compliance, or whether it's related more on the tech side, which is information system and informatics. So through this year, I do want to talk about what I expect in college, and obviously I have a big decision to make in front of me. So in college, I think it's a great opportunity, whether it's in the UK or the US, to explore many fields. And I think more so in the US, where you can really branch off to different areas, maybe out of your expertise or something in your comfort zone. So I think in UCL, I hope to enter a lot of case competitions, and I hope to really take advantage of the network it has and the global reputation it has to really pursue what I really think is fit for me.
Great. Thank you. I wanted him to elaborate because I got to work with Ethan and Kimberly and not with Braden and Daisy. So I wanted to give him a chance to say a bit more. And Daisy has just graduated from ISF Academy. And I think maybe Adrian, could you move that a bit? And, oh, I am sorry. And Daisy will be, okay, great. And Daisy will be studying at Stanford and thinking of computer science. Something, yes. And something I will always remember about Daisy, about when I first met her, she shared this. She has conducted research on the gut of horses, and it's research on the biome, right? The gut biome of, I guess it's called equine gut microbiome, and the effects of antibiotics on that. In short, horseshit. Yes, so literally. And I think you can say a few words about your interest in science and also maybe your experience with research, which is quite exceptional. I think to have done that level of research in high school is something I'm sure many people will be interested in hearing about. So I will ask each of you to answer one question about yourself, just so they can get to know, the audience can get to know you a little bit better. Ethan, do you want to share how your first year of college has been, what you've, because you're the only one on the panel that's been to college already.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Ethan. So I had, one of the strangest years of my life going to college during a pandemic. So obviously the first semester I was stuck in Hong Kong and I had to balance time zones and, getting used to, a new campus environment all in my own bedroom. And I did that with my first class being at 10 p.m. I had a dance class at 4:30 a.m. I had a theater class at 7:30 a.m. So it was a very, very crazy time to get to know people. But at the same time, even though it was exhausting and a lot of late night snacks and coffee to get me through it, it was also a really interesting experience to get to know people, to learn what it means to create art in a time of inconsistency, in a time of just emotional breakdown. So it made me learn a lot about my own craft and how other people have used art as a tool to make sense of this time. And in January, I went to the real life campus in Princeton, New Jersey. And even though it was in person, a lot of my classes were still virtual. So it has been a challenge to actually feel like a student there. And I also had opportunities to meet people in person. But my one in-person activity was just a 10-person chamber group rehearsal. I play violin, so it was like a chamber music rehearsal. But during that time, I still had a lot of opportunities to do a lot of theater with people. I joined a theater group on campus, and through a lot of that work, I was given an artistic grant at the end of the school year to carry out some of my projects for the summer. And so in July, I put on one of my own plays, one of my first full-length plays in Beijing in a theater festival. And that was a really, really rewarding experience. And the person who directed it was actually my prefect at Choate. My prefect at Choate. And it's really, really crazy, inspiring, and humbling to see how relationships from boarding school actually continue into college. So yeah, that's my year.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you very much, Ethan. Sorry, I struggled in the beginning to say anything about you because when you know someone for so long, it's very hard to put in a few words what you think of them. But I think one thing from a college counselor's point of view that sets Ethan apart is his range as a creative. He choreographed in high school. He wrote plays. You were editor of a journal, and he danced himself. and also was a great photographer. So really easy to work with a student with so much output, creative output. But I think that also relates a bit to the college application process. If you are someone who is creative, thinking about ways to document what you do and how to present that. So there are different ways to present portfolios. Kimberly is also a very creative person and can share about that as well. And I think it's a nice there's a bit of a difference in the way they present it. So I think because Ethan was trying to show multimedia artistic talent, a website was a great way to do that, where there were videos and also his photography could be visually displayed. And Kimberly, you can share maybe a bit about how you shared your beautiful Chinese paintings, watercolors, and the content of that too, I think was very special.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kimberly. And so this year I took a gap year. I'm going to Brown University in the fall. Well, I'll first say the reason why I took a gap year was because of COVID. So I personally was not I'm not a night person, I would say. So unlike Ethan, I didn't want to do night school, which I knew I had to do. And also I knew that Brown, especially for Brown, they had a summer semester this year. So I didn't want to have not really a summer. So I just chose to choose a gap year instead. So according to that question that Renee just asked me, I personally really like doing art, like painting, oil painting, Chinese painting, more like just like 2D, but I also did some 3D multimedia art. However, I did IB art and I knew from IB art, I liked it, but like, I knew I didn't want to like study art in college. But the way that you would send your art in college is mostly through this program or like system platform called Slideroom, right? So I didn't want to use that form to send in my art because if you send it in through Slideroom, that means you're an art major, you're applying as an art major. And actually, I chose to apply for sociology. So what I did was I had all these art pieces and like I discussed it with Renee at that time. And what we came up with was presenting it as a book. So I actually had different pieces of art. And then when I was discussing my art with Renee, we realized that my art was, it came as pairs. So like each art piece would be related in context to another piece of art. So that's why in my book, I presented these artworks as pairs. Hence, my book was called Duality. And also because of my identity as a twin, it like further developed my character inside this book, I would say. So yeah.
Could you talk about how it related to your major, sociology, even though you weren't an art major? I think your art, like the digital impact of.
Right. Okay. So actually, in my art, there were topics that I touched on related to technology, community, environmental science, and I think all of these topics somehow have a connection with sociology. So that's why ultimately I decided to major in sociology. And yeah, so I had these pieces that were like technology related. And so I paired them up together. Yeah, I would say I had 4 themes in my book that were all related to duality. And in the end, I just think that I connected them as pairs. So like it showed different sides of me. Yeah.
If you saw the paintings, which I wish we could share, you would understand even more like why, how she explored her interest in sociology through her art. Like there was a painting with, I really remember, 3 figures that looked almost exactly the same, but there were QR codes in the background. And then they got kind of more and more devoid of color. And that was on the theme of how interacting with social media kind of sapped people of their emotional energy. And we discussed even your personal statement related a bit to the impact of social media on adolescents. So I feel like there are ways in which the portfolios don't necessarily just have to demonstrate your artistic talent, but can also speak to causes that you care about, issues, concepts, ideas you've been exploring. Great, thank you very much, Kimberly. And Braden, you already shared a bit about how you're thinking about the future, but if there's anything you want to add to that, or any special talents you want to talk about, feel free to do so. You had an interesting experience in high school too with the water system, right?
So to talk a bit about, I wouldn't call it talents, but just something I did over the past few years. I find, so 2 major things I would highlight I did last summer and this summer is working. And working, I feel like really gives colleges a chance, it gives you a chance to prove yourself, your maturity and what you've seen to colleges. And if I talk about the UK, they really like to see when you've integrated sort of work experiences into your personal statement. So last year, I worked with, I started off small. I worked with a social enterprise called Urban Spring, and they have these water fountains which are brilliant. And our school had this terrible water system. It was disgusting. The water was yellow. So if you put the 2 and 2 together, so I think a good idea was to integrate sort of an internship with Urban Spring and see how I can make my local community, which is my school, sort of a better environment. So this, since I'm applying to business, this sort of fit into 2 roles that I'm touching in my statement, which is environmental activism and sort of the business side of a social enterprise. And this year, as I keep trying to explore different fields, I'm working more closely to the fintech side, which I've joined a virtual bank as a summer intern. And I'd say there is really a lot behind the scenes that we don't know about. And I think if you can bring that stuff out in a college application, it shows a certain depth of knowledge that they would be impressed at.
That's great. And I'm going to ask Karen to say a few words.
Hi, everyone. So I worked with Braden this past year, and that's definitely one thing that I do want to emphasize in terms of differentiating yourself. So business, STEM subjects, economics, there are some very popular majors out there, and a lot of people apply. And an important thing is to find a way to show that you have an in-depth understanding of what you're getting yourself into, and to identify yourself to the university so that when they look at you, they know that, oh, you're the environmental science guy who's interested in social enterprise. So the more you know, the better. And you're free. You don't have to tie yourself to that particularly. I think, for example, Braden's still exploring compliance, law. There's plenty of opportunity to do that, but to have a cause that you champion and to have a subfield, that would certainly be a huge plus. And you can also look at how your interests would tie to a particular school. So Braden and I had a lot of back and forth when we were researching schools to really look into the major you're studying. Instead of saying, oh, I really want to study economics, maybe there's a particular course, economics tied to environmentalism, economics tied to a social enterprise, and that way you can then differentiate yourself and the interests that you would have.
That's a great piece of advice in terms of differentiation, which is something we'll touch upon more later. So next, and last but not least, Daisy, can you please share a little bit more about yourself and your plans?
Hi, I'm Daisy. I just graduated from ISF, and next year, hopefully, I'll be spending it at Stanford, probably majoring in something related to CS.
About research,
Oh yeah.
feel free to talk
I think I'm getting labeled as the research kid here, so might as well. Whatever, stick with it.
Sorry.
It's all right. In for $1, no, sorry, it's in for a penny, in for a dime.
Yes.
Is it? That's not even the correct thing. Whatever. Getting off track. But in high school, I was pretty heavily involved in a lot of research stuff because my school, very fortunately, was gave me a lot of resources to support me down that path. And so I was engaged in a lot of bioinformatics research, which is sort of statistics, biology, mostly statistics, computer science, kind of all mashed into one thing. And so I was able to engage in quite a few competitions as well. And we got to write papers, do thesis defense, and it was a really good experience overall. Learned a lot about research. And I also had a lot of involvement in my community, and I always was very sort of involved within the school and trying to make it better if through various different causes, will you say? Like very involved in student leadership, but also founding my own clubs and just very involved in leadership activities as well. Sort of.
Thanks. Thank you, Daisy, and thank you for highlighting that. And I'd like to ask Min to add a few words about Daisy.
Yeah. So I had the joy of working with Daisy. And I definitely, I mean, it's easy to label Daisy as the research kid.
I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah, no. I mean, among this group, perhaps she's done the most research, but I think what Daisy was just saying, she's much more than that. And particularly for American schools, they look for a more well-rounded student. So unlike the UK, which, cares more about the substance of your specialty, the US really wants the all-rounded student. Of course, it's nice to have some depth, but they do care about your holistic portfolio. So for Daisy, as she was saying, she was in student leadership, founded a physics club to help middle schoolers understand the fun, the joy, the beauty of physics that she didn't get to experience when she was a middle school student. So that's what we talked about in her essay, along with how she helped her student body to deal with COVID. So negotiating with the school to reduce the workload and creating a Discord channel so that the kids in her grade can have a way to still connect amid COVID. But then she's also a badminton player. And those are the various aspects that the American universities really like. I think that's why she was successful.
About her competitions, but they were not.
No,
competitions.
they are not. Yeah. So I think in terms of differentiation, certainly external validation, like these very difficult competitions, would make a difference. So for Daisy, it was the ST Yao. Right, STL competition, and she made it to the Asia round and the global round, and I believe for 2 different categories, right?
2 different years.
2 different years, yeah. So she didn't just do it once. She was successful, and she medaled in multiple years. So and that is a really, really tough competition to win. So having something like that is definitely a good feather in your cap.
Great. Thank you. So now we'll move on to the main questions of the panel. The first of which is, how did you choose the colleges that you ended up applying for? If you could talk a bit about that, because that's one of the major decisions that everyone has to make. So we'll start with Ethan.
Yeah, so I think I definitely wanted to apply to a really wide range of colleges that spanned difference in location, size. I think it stems from the fact that I am a very indecisive person, and there were a lot of things that I wasn't really sure about, and I knew I wanted to give myself a lot of options. That in the back of my head, I was still considering, what if I went to art school? But I also wanted to go to like a big school where I can meet a lot of different types of people. So the process became this like list of a lot of schools that covered, a broad spectrum. But obviously that is not necessarily the approach for some people, because some people might go in the application process with a very clear mindset of what they want. But for me, I really appreciated applying to a wide range of schools. And even now, I'm still not entirely sure what I want to major in. But one thing I was really sure of was that I needed the schools I applied to have a strong arts program, because I knew I needed that balance between a very rigorous academic training and environment, but also at the same time have all of the technical training that you would need to be an artist or someone who wants to be serious about the arts. So that was really just my main criteria. The rest, I was really open to size, location. Yeah.
Thank you. And in particular, for anyone in the audience who might be interested in the arts, I think that's one of the main choices. Do you apply to just an art school or something that has more than that? But they also need to have an art program that is strong enough to give you perhaps connections if you're going to develop as an artist later on, and that experience and exposure. Location does matter sometimes, especially for art students, because it is different doing art in LA versus art somewhere like a little more like suburban or more urban and on the different coast. So I think there are many factors to look at, but I think what Ethan was saying about having at least one criteria that matters a lot to you, that balance and the strong art program already helps a lot, because otherwise, most of the time we work with people, they often have one top choice that they know about, and then everything else they kind of like, okay, whatever sounds good, whatever my parents want, or whatever I think I've heard of. But I think with clear criteria like that, you can navigate the list a lot better. In particular, because many schools have a cap, right? 10 is the usual cap. Boarding schools are a little more generous because schools also have to handle the recommendation letters. So the college counselor, if you apply to 20 schools and every kid did, that would be a lot more work. And so I do think there is some advantage to having a limit, but it's also nice if you do get deferred or if you have to apply regular to have a bit more room, that's also nice. But after they speak, I will also ask the counselors whether you have any advice about college list. Okay, Kimberly.
How I chose my colleges was, as Renee said just now, that my school had a cap of 10. But, for the cap, it's like, if you want to apply to UK, that's actually counted as one, even though technically you're applying to 5 schools. And for the UC system, I don't really remember how many UC schools there are, but that's also counted as one choice in the 10 cap of 10. So actually I applied to more than 10 schools, but in my school it's just like it counted as 10. So for me, Brown was definitely my top choice because I always knew I wanted to go to a liberal arts college. So actually all my schools were I chose my schools because they were like liberal arts schools. Also, another reason why I chose Brown was because it's right next to RISD, which is a very top tier design school, art school. So I wanted to cross-register classes over there too. But for my other choices, I applied to UK just because I was thinking I could diversify, but I also knew deep down, I wanted to go to the US because I didn't really actually know for what I wanted to study. Like Ethan just said, I was also like indecisive about what I wanted to study. So also for my school, my school counselor was always like, you guys need target schools, safety schools, and also like reach schools. So I chose my schools based on reach, target, and safety. So I knew I had at least a few safeties, a few targets, and reach. Yeah. So my reach was like Brown University.
Yeah, and definitely when we were coming up with that list, we did a lot of research and looked at the sociology programs of the different schools. And so I think one thing about like what you both said, not knowing your majors, speaking of majors, when you form your college list, something we recommend is looking up the department websites and looking at what the professors actually are researching, who's working in that department. Because even within a field like sociology, there are schools that are stronger on the economic side, on the data science side, on the geography side, or the environmental or anthropological side. So there may be a department that really speaks to you, and that can also help. Because after you choose your reach schools, sometimes it becomes really hard to choose your target and safety because it's like a bit of a mixed bag. But I think if you do know what the departments that you're interested in, and maybe more than one department, but if there are some professors doing areas of work that interest you, it also helps a bit. Braden, could you please share?
Sure. Thank you.
So I'll let you guys in on a little secret. I did apply to the US as well. But yeah, I think there are winners and losers in the college application process, but I digress. Anyways, so I think that if you want to apply to colleges, what I did was I asked myself a few questions. And the first one was that whether would I want a school, maybe a better school, but the program wasn't as specialized or wasn't as famous, or a school maybe which has less fame or less reputation, but had a really strong particular program. And I think that is something that you guys will have to ask yourselves as applying into these colleges. And secondly, I'd also recommend that to understand the relationship between your high school and some of the colleges. So for my school, we have good traction with the UK colleges. So I would apply to UCL, hoping that my school could help me boost my application chances and to get into these colleges. So is there any HKIS students here? Anyone from HKIS? Yeah, so your school has great traction with USC, University of South California. So I think USC has a great business school, Marshall. It has great, it's generally a really good school. So you could keep an eye out on those things and really take advantage of that sort of historic relationship. Yeah, that's it.
Great advice. No, very smart advice. And I think looking on both sides of the pond is is a practice and I think a privilege of Hong Kong students, especially IB students. And so Braden was able to do that because the exit qualifications were recognized internationally. And I think also, even if ultimately everyone only ends up going to one school, you do so much work, so much research, but it's one school. What I want to emphasize though, is that the journey really matters too, because in that process of looking at schools in the US, I'm sure you also learned a lot about how different countries approach the same subject, same with Kimberly. And I think down the road, you might go to graduate school in the States, and what you learn in applying, I think, will still be very useful later on. Would you like to add something, Karen?
So I definitely agree with that. And I would also encourage everyone to not overlook your safety school selection and think through how you would apply early action versus regular decision. Because when you're doing your research, especially for your safety schools, you should feel comfortable and confident that if you go there, you can thrive as well. And a lot of these schools, they track what's known as demonstrated interest. So sign on to those mailing lists, go on to the virtual tour. They will know if you had gone on those websites. And that way, it actually helps boost your chances to go. And another plus is you might end up falling in love with the school as well. Obviously, everyone wants to get into their dream college, but people thrive everywhere they go, and you are always looking for your best fit college. And if you thrive there, ultimately what you're doing beyond college is finding a job. And if you thrive in your current college, your chances of getting a good first job and thriving in your career would be a lot higher as well.
Very wise advice. Definitely don't have a school on your list that you wouldn't be excited to go to, right? And I think what Karen was saying about research and doing the virtual tours and so on, speaking to people, the more you put in, the more you get out of it. It's like a person. If you only see their name or like meet them once, you can't have a deep relationship. You can't exactly feel excited about getting to about them because you have no relationship. But if you put in the time to research your safety school list, you'll actually find that in fact, the rankings it's almost an artificial exercise that this company invented to make a lot of money. But when you really look at the schools, what top 50 schools in any country have to offer, but particularly the US, they're very, very similar. And many schools have terrific professors, research opportunities. And so I think if you do that, you'll feel a lot more excited about a wider range of schools. And so also, it will help manage your stress level about applying, because it really is not like, okay, there's one hoop and I'm aiming for that one hoop and I have one shot. It really isn't that. So it's about the next step in your future, right? And there can be multiple stories, right? Multiple versions that are equally appealing. So doing that research as the applicant is essential. The counselors can do the research to advise you, but really how you feel about it depends on whether you've done the research. Okay, Daisy, yes.
So similar to Kimberly and Braden as well, I applied to the UK and the US, and I also did Canada as well. So that's, yeah, quite a lot. For my school list, I was looking for a school that had a very strong CS program and also sort of would allow me to explore the humanities as well, because I'm very interested in both. And for me specifically, I really wanted an opportunity to conduct bioinformatics research and a very specific branch of it. And so I sort of combed through the professors of every website, and I would like look at what their recent publications were, what they were involved in, if I could get involved as an undergraduate, which is probably overkill, but you know, it worked. It worked. Who cares? I might have lost a bit of sleep, but yeah, it was worth it. And yeah, and similar to Karen mentioned, I think it's very important to do all these things, especially for your safety schools, because I ended up with a list of safeties that wasn't, it was pretty conventional. Yeah, it was pretty conventional. But I was able to sort of like find a thing that was like, oh, I'm super excited to do this in every single school. And so it was like, even if it was like the worst ranked or whatever, I'd been super stoked to attend.
Yeah. So Daisy, even for her safety school, she was applying to some of the honors programs in those safety schools. So then, you know, she would still have something really interesting to do. So you can look at that as well, because for the, you know, lesser ranked schools, if you will, for lack of a better term, there are still some really interesting programs, as Daisy said there. And you have something really specific that you want to study, like Daisy, you really want to do the homework. And I think one thing that often students take for granted or don't think about is how much time it takes to finalize that list. Yeah, that's actually a lot of time. It's not just jumping into the essays, but it is taking the time to, you know, look at the options and do the research. So that's often our homework for them, is to do the research. If you don't do that work, you know, we can't decide for you. Or if we decide for you, then it may not be the right list for you. And I also want to emphasize what Renee said, and maybe perhaps also Karen, for your safety schools, they have to be real options. Yeah, like as Daisy said, schools that you would really be happy to go to, because you never know with this process. It is so crazy where you'll end up. So your list must be a list full of options that you'd be thrilled by.
I think managing your mindset and how you see this process is actually so important. If you think of it as, you know, I want to have a cheeseburger, and if I'm not going to have a cheeseburger, I'm not going to be happy with this meal. You're really setting yourself up for not being very happy, potentially being very unhappy, right? But if you're just like, I want a good meal, and there are many different ways to get that, and the more you learn about food and different cuisines, the more you can appreciate. You're actually becoming a more inclusive person. You're broadening your exposure and more open-minded, right? So I'm really happy to say that we have kids here who are open-minded and can apply that creativity to coming up with a great college list. Okay, so moving on. Second question. How did you differentiate yourself? Because we all know that with these very selective colleges, grades are not enough, although they are very much important. And what are three things that you would say set you apart? So We are trying to manage our time a little. I know
Yeah,
we're
so
quite
I
over
think
time.
We also touched on this question a lot
Yes.
already in the intro.
So maybe just one thing
Yeah.
that sets you apart that you want to elaborate that you haven't talked about as much or go into greater detail about. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because I think one thing that differentiated me is actually still one of my personal insecurities. My mom likes to make fun of me because she always describes me with the quote, you're kind of like a jack of all trades, but you're a master of none at anything. And she's just like, what are you really trying to do? Like doing all these different things without a lot of focus. And that is something I'm still struggling with because it is hard to see people around you sort of, focusing on different things. And then what I was really interested in was multiplicity. That excited me more. Like I was more interested in diversity rather than specialization. And so to highlight that, I remember in my Princeton supplement, one of the prompts was to respond to a quote. And that quote was about culture and how culture is something that you curate for yourself. And the essay began with me describing my dorm room. And how there are a ton of different posters in my dorm room. There's like a Miles Davis poster, a Justin Peck article, Renaissance sculptures. And I talked about how these posters relate to one another and how I saw it as a bit of a metaphor for what I was interested in. And how I began as, a competitive swimmer and how that led me to, my interest in food. I used to do food blogging when I was in 7th grade. And then how that led me to other interests and to actually feel confident that this was my way of appreciating everything that was around me and that this was my lens of seeing the world. So even though today I'm being pressured every day to, choose a major, like choose something to focus on. I'm still, trying to do it all because I like it. And, it's always been a very important part of who I am as a person. So, yeah.
Oh, I was going to add to that. So one thing that I would say is a great differentiator, it sounds super corny, is passion. And it will really come through no matter what your interest is. And no matter, it could sound really mundane to the next person, but if it's something that you're excited about, write about it, talk about it, just tell it to whoever would be interested in listening. I mean, food blogging sounds awesome. I could hear a lot of moms are out there telling me this won't get my son a job, but if that's something they're interested in, you'll just see it in the eyes, you'll see it in the words that they express. It will just be there. So really think about what you're passionate about.
And the word I would use to describe Ethan's passion is insuppressible, because I just think about what you did last year, dancing in your room alone, like recording it online at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
That is passion. And I have to have a chat with your mom because you're not a jack of all trades, you're a Renaissance man, and that is very rare.
On my mom.
No, your mom is awesome. She's just teasing you, I know. Said with great love. I would probably say that to my own kid. But as your counselor, I definitely see you much more as a Renaissance man, because really his intellectual, the rigor, the essays that Ethan can write, the level of sophistication in your thinking and the depth in all the arts. You were not dabbling in them, right? You were like, editor-in-chief of publications. You were the head choreographer of your school. So this is not dabbling, right? And I agree with your mom that if you're not going to commit to things and you switch club to club each year, then that would be much more of a problem. And as counselors, we would be worried about that. But I think in this case, the challenge, though, with Ethan's case was making sure he didn't burn out and also didn't let extracurriculars take over his life so that academics would suffer. Because that is a danger for people, especially in the creative arts. Because these things, you put on a play, we go and it's 3 hours, but they practice for months, right? And it's just rehearsal is very intense. And so I think that going back to the mindset and the mental health as you go through this process, managing stress levels, I think that's one thing that as counselors we try to do. Thank you for sharing. Kimberly. please share. What sets you apart?
All right, so I think in my college application, one thing that probably set me apart was my volunteer work. And I'm sure it's like, yeah, you're doing charity. Like, I'm sure all kids do it at least some point in their time in like high school life, right? But for me, I was really involved in lots of charity organizations in my school and outside of school. So I also went on a trip to rural China multiple times with school and outside of school as well. So I believe that actually it's the most important thing about charity or like volunteer service is definitely the interpersonal connections that you make and having to experience them. So that made me realize that like, you know, all these interpersonal connections are so valuable. And that's what I wrote about in my comment app, that I think nowadays we're so out of touch from each other, especially in Hong Kong where technology is so prominent. So that's one thing I put in my comment app. And I think I highlighted through my charity work and volunteer services. So an example of what I did was going to Poland Cook every week to teach these 4-year-old kids art. And so from that experience, I actually really valued the relationships I developed with these kids. And also another experience I had was going with school to rural China and teaching these kids who suffer from Down syndrome. So yeah, from that experience, I really, really just, it opened my eyes to the world, right? Like none of us, we're not all born the same way. And yeah, so after that experience, I was like, I'm so lucky to be living in this world. So that's the perspective I put into my comment app essay.
Yes, no, actually, I was going to say, we didn't rehearse this. None of these answers are prepared. So I didn't know what you were going to say, but I was going to say that your social work, your service, volunteer work, that was so consistent in all years, actually, even before high school, really came across to me in getting to know you. And we talk about authenticity and passion, and these words are like, they take no meaning until you actually get to read more about a person. And what I really felt was that doing those things also made the story more coherent about your interest in sociology. Because a sociologist that only reads books and listens to talks is probably not as convincing as someone who has direct interaction with a wide range of people from different parts of the world as well. And the time commitment, again, that shows how genuine it is, like that you care. And even when like Kimberly has like a break, she will perform. You didn't even talk about your music talent, but she's also a very accomplished musician. And she and her sister will perform in charity concerts, like every year, regularly, annually, for elderly people. And those things we didn't even get to put in the resume. Right. But to me, as someone getting to know you, it's just a mark of your character and your heart. And I feel that when we were talking about your major, so sometimes in the process, right, when we first met, like you were totally unsure about what the major would be, and it ranged from like geography to art to like, lots of different things, international relations. But I think over time, as you learned more about the field of sociology, you also saw how that connected with your life experiences. So thank you for sharing that volunteer piece, which is such an important part of the process too, in terms of what you want to show. Braden, could you share a bit?
Yes. So I wouldn't say I have a very sharp edge, but I do have one word advice, and that is to read. Read as much as you can. And this comes both with the UK and the US. I'm sure everyone here, even if they don't talk about it, they're reading a lot. And for the UK, the personal statement wants you to dig deep. It really wants you to know what your major is, and you're very dedicated to it. So they want you to have read not only books on the subject, but maybe even research papers or different publications, the newspaper even. And I say that reading in these different fields or reading what you like, it'll pay off in very unexpected ways. So for example, so I was reading this book called The Lean Startup, and it's a very introductory business book. And when I was working at the intern in Urban Spring, I found out they ran on the exact same business model. So by making this connection, that's something you can write about in your UCAS personal statement Whereas if someone could just, oh, I'll just read the blurb of the book and I'll just, put it at the end, I could tie to something that I actually experienced. And then a few other things is how reading also helped me a lot with my Common App statement. And that's a bit more on the sort of literature and the narrative side, where I would say Karen thinks I have a really sort of unconventional Common App statement. And I had a lot of that inspiration from reading. So I think that just reading in general will allow you to understand not only what you're interested, your major, but also the sort of the subset, like the small pockets of information that your major should encompass. So I think that is very important, and especially if you want to do well in the interviews, the Cambridge and the Oxford ones, those reading will save your life.
Braden's very modest, but I very much enjoyed reading what he had to write. Usually I give structural advice as well as doing some editing for style, but Braden had a very unique style, and I really, really enjoyed every time I asked him to write something. He would produce something beautifully written, a little verbose, but it was fine. Like we were able to cut it down to meet the word limit. But I very much enjoyed reading what you had to write. So I mean, that is definitely something to differentiate within any of the personal statements.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Braden. Daisy.
I think I've been accidentally labeled as the research kid here, so yeah, that was something, definitely. But for me, what I tried to emphasize as well was that I'm very involved in the sciences, that's for sure, but I'm also sort of very involved outside of the sciences. I was very avid participation of like debate, wasn't very good at it, but I showed up a lot, so that counted. I was like, actually, that's the same for a lot of my extracurriculars, I'm realizing. Oh, whatever. But yeah, I did a lot of badminton. I was team captain. Yeah, there was like a lot of, I tutored, I volunteered quite a lot, started my own volunteer organizations as well. And so I say if my tip is that sort of, for me, it was essentially if I had an opportunity to do something, I probably did it at some point. I might have given up, but like I tried it. And that was really rewarding for me. And also, even if I didn't have a direct opportunity, if it was something I really wanted to pursue, I'd do my own research, try to find out if there was a way I could like get in, or at least try to do like, sort of try it out at least. And so I think that's something that I guess set me apart, and that's my advice.
Can you speak a little bit about the research process
Oh.
that you went through, and sort of the SEL as well as the conference in the US that you went
Oh, yeah. So for a little background information, I researched a lot on the equine gut microbiome that I said before, and which was very, very, very generously supported by my school. Very thankful to them. Shout out to ISF. Yeah, school pride. But I think the research process is a bit sort of very painful and unpredictable, because there's so much time you're spending, especially because our topic, I think no one's it was to the point where no one's doing it in Hong Kong. Like the judges at the thesis defense would be like, okay, this is cool, but what are you doing? Like, actually, I've never seen this. And we'd be like, this again. So what's really hard was that we had support, but we had there was no one who had done our specific thing that we knew of that we could talk to a lot. So a lot of it was just sort of Googling midnight, like, how do I do like this basic thing in this software that I've never touched before? Yeah. Hey, sorry, what?
What was the project's name again? I'm recording.
Oh,
Gut microbiome.
yeah, equine gut microbiome. That's,
Equine gut. I have to write it down. Right?
it's okay. Very good. But a lot, sorry, where was I?
Sorry, you were saying.
Oh yeah, research, painful, yes. So, but yeah, so it's a lot of, because I had a research partner as well, and we were very good friends. And so that helped a lot, because essentially consisted of us staying at the lab until about like, we got kicked out. And then, yeah, it's pretty much, you get very familiar with the school security guard when they pull you out. So yeah, good times. Yeah, good times. The downside to it is you don't sleep a lot. I don't recommend it. I wouldn't do it. Yeah, but it was a very rewarding experience, and you do learn a lot about sort of what do I do when literally no one has an answer for what I'm doing. Yeah.
I mean, to do original research, at this age, at the stage of your education is quite remarkable. And that's why she was successful in the ST Yao, competition. Karen.
Oh, no, I just wanted to interject that this is how you talk about passion without actually saying that you're passionate.
And if I may add, sort of talking about how to differentiate yourself, right? But sometimes you can write about something that is really common, like tutoring, right? I think, how many of you tutored as your service? Okay, Brendan, the other service. But it is so common. Like for Hong Kong kids, that's probably the most common service. But the way that Daisy wrote about it was very original, and it was really compelling and memorable. And for me, that's why it worked. But then when we wrote about badminton, which was for another essay topic, which is also very common, right? Talk about sports. Usually, like, the advice is to not talk about sports too much because everyone talks about sports.
Yeah. Or even if you're a recruit.
Exactly. So the way that we wrote about badminton was really common. So then we scrapped that and went for something else. So it's not so much about the topic, but how you write about it and whether it's original and unique enough to be memorable. Because, when I worked in the Yale admissions office, we were trained that the admissions officers only have 30 seconds to a minute per essay. Yeah, basically they're just scanning it, and if it's interesting, they'll read it. So it does have to grab their attention. It does have to be original enough to be interesting.
Yeah, and along those lines, UCAS essay is rarely convertible to your Common App essay because it's a different game. It's just different system. And in the interest of time, we're going to have only one more final question, and I'll just pass the mic along and start with Daisy, actually. So looking back, if you were to do one thing differently, I mean, you've all recommended what to do based on what you've done, but if you could do one thing differently, what would you do?
For me, it's apply to less schools. As I mentioned before, Min knows very well. I basically didn't really sleep for a pretty extended period. Would not recommend it. And yeah, don't do it. It's not good, especially if you don't get it. Yeah, just don't do it. Don't do it. Sole advice. So do instead is cut down my school list because I spent a lot of time sort of applying for schools that in hindsight, they're very good schools and they're very good programs, but in hindsight, when I really looked into them, especially the UK, I wasn't particularly interested in what they had to offer, and I don't think they would have been a good fit, and I wouldn't have gone. So in hindsight, I wouldn't have done those applications and just make it more focused, because if you count the UCs as separate and the UCAS as separate, 5 applications of 9 applications, I think I ended up applying to about 20. Don't do that. Yeah, don't do it. Sleep, please.
Well, contrary to Daisy, I did sleep a lot, but as I slept, my grades were in shambles. And I think that anyone here, if you're in year 9, every test matters. It really does. And I'm looking back, I think that was what defeated my US application, if I were to say so myself, was that my year 9, year 10 grades were just in shambles, absolutely. And back then I didn't know, and they had to look, because the US is a very holistic review. So they want to see you put in consistent effort from the very beginning. And in order to show that consistent effort, every test will matter and every review, and all your teachers, their recommendations will matter. And when the predicted grade comes, you might have to cash in a little favor, get a good impression for them to, up your grade up. So I would say that, definitely sleep a bit, but also don't sleep too much so you can get a better grade.
For me, it would be not to procrastinate. Don't leave your essays till the last minute, because I think for me, I had to do early decision for Brown, and the date was 1st of November, and I submitted my application August 31st night, but also because I did procrastinate quite a lot, so I would not recommend you do that. Well, yeah, and also I would probably like start earlier. I thought that, I had so much time.
This is so true. Please, everyone, listen to me.
But then when the time came closer and closer to the due date, I was like, oh no, because I probably only started drafting or actually have a decent plan for my Common App essay in October. So I would just recommend everyone to start earlier and start planning with the proper timeline.
I kind of want to talk about the very specific time between early action and regular decision, which is a 3-week stretch of hell. In which, so my story, basically, I got deferred by my early action school. And I was alone in Connecticut. It was super cold. I had a roommate, so I didn't want to open it in my room because I knew he got into his school. So I booked a practice room, opened it alone, got deferred, cried for a good hour. And I took it very personally. I was like, it was a very existential moment. I was like, what am I not doing good enough? Because being such a perfectionist, I kept asking myself, what did I not do? What did I not do? And I was stuck in that place for a very, very long time. I felt that decision really hurt me in a way I wasn't not preparing for it, because the months leading up to it, I was, really, really developing the best aspects of myself. I was confident in what I had to offer. And so that moment really, really impacted me. So I just want to tell everyone who does not get the news they want during that time that you cannot take that decision personally. And you really have to find a way to rebound as quick as possible within those 3 weeks. Because the process isn't really a meritocracy, and there's so many variables that could affect the decision, and you really cannot let a decision completely halt your progression. You have to keep going and believe that you have a lot of good traits that still need to be written about, developed about, and you're so worthy of getting into the school that you want to get in. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I think we might be talking about the same thing, but building on procrastination and the weeks between, your deferral to applying regular decision, rewind and make sure that before you receive that early action, early decision that you are working on your regular decision applications, because those weeks, first of all, your first semester grades will matter, and you'll be taking finals and you'll be rushing the essays. And so if you plan ahead and if you prepare, those weeks hopefully won't be as difficult as most people would find it.
No, I really wanted to thank each of you for sharing and being vulnerable with us, and that's why we wanted to include this question about setbacks and like what you would have done differently, because I think what we want to share in this panel is not just the usual, here's what to do, here's the advice, and then give you success stories. Because when you look at everyone ends up in a college at some point if they want to go, and you never see where they were and how they got there. And I think that there are always going to be moments where, you hit a home run, there are false steps. You don't always hear about that, or about the places they did not get into or wanted to. But in the end, people do find a place that they want to go to, and they may or may not be happy where they end up. Actually, it's not always, even I have so many stories of people getting into the first choice school, and then by the second year they're coming back for a transfer, and you're like, what? How did that happen? Because sometimes the reality may not match your expectations, or you change. I mean, even in this year, you guys have evolved and grown, and your perspective, your maturity, all of that grows and changes over time. So I hope that this panel sharing reminds everyone that this is a very human process. It's a very personal process. Before this panel started, we were just chatting about different ways to write Chinese characters. And even the character Ho, like for fire, which only has 4 strokes, there are 3 different ways to write it. And we're talking about the character for horse, each one of them had a different way of writing it. And this is something which, and some of you went to local schools, like, try to drill it into you that there's one way and, they take marks off if you don't do it that way. In the end, people are all different. So don't feel like there's just one path. And I hope that this sharing reassures you of that, but reminds you also of how to put your best foot forward and how to manage your own expectations, your own emotions as you go through it. We have time for questions. So I'll take maybe 2 from the audience, the live audience first, and then we have some from online as well. And we'll go back and forth till we finish answering them. Yes, please.
Right, so you're definitely going to be going for a job at university, right? So my question is, how much does the consideration of getting an actual job at university play a part in the in your applications, right? So do you consider, I want to be doing some kind of job after this, whether it's professional or whether it's research or whether it's
Can I take
This
it?
is for anyone.
yeah, how big of a role do you think that plays in your consideration?
So I'll take this question. So you're asking what is the future career prospect? How much does that translate to? Right. So I've been thinking about a dilemma similar recently. So if I didn't tell you guys, I would be either considering UCL or Hong Kong U local school and doing their BBA law program. So as I thought between these two options, I figured that what I was thinking was, a law degree is definitely going to give you a better career prospect. You're going to have a better starting salary. And I think that this is stuff that you need to think about. Like if you're going into a really good school, but you're doing maybe a very niche subject, then there is this livelihood thing that you have to eventually consider about. So yeah, and I think keep that in mind. And especially if anyone here wants to be a business major, there are locations that will matter. Like, would you rather go to, let's say, NYU Stern or maybe a business school in Alabama? Like, the location is going to have a huge difference on the network you make and sort of where you're going to go, what companies are you going to go to. So all of these are factors that are career related that I think everyone here should be aware of.
Do you want to talk about some schools like Santa Clara,
So a school that that has been rising in a lot of high school students' esteem is the University of Santa Clara. So it's a school located right in the middle of Silicon Valley, and if you don't feel like you have the grades to get you into Stanford, Santa Clara is a great opportunity for you to network with all the startups, the Googles, the Facebook, the Apple, like large companies and the small companies within Silicon Valley, if that is something that you're interested in. So it's an example of a school that may not be, at the tip of everyone's tongue, but then is a strong contender for future career prospects.
If you look at the leaders of, Fortune 500 companies, many of them are not from Ivy League schools, right? So actually that's something definitely, I'm glad you raised that question to bear in mind. Any other questions? If not, we have quite a few from online, but. Was there a question? No? Okay.
Encouraging my son.
Oh, okay.
It's not working.
It's okay. No. Think about it, and I will take one from online. And if anything occurs to you, feel free to ask. So, one question was very practical. Any advice on preparing for the SATs? Which seems like a distant memory, I'm sure. It's the type of thing you want to wipe away. Yeah, let's hear from all of you.
Don't do the SATs, do the ACTs. That's my advice. Yeah, he seconds
I
it.
second that.
Mostly because I basically, it was like the whole spiel, did the whole practice test, did a bunch of them, wasn't very good at any of them. There were solid scores, but they weren't 1600s. So I was like, you know what? I want to quit. I'm going to try the ACTs. And then I did them. I was like, wow, this is considerably easier for me because my, I guess, specialty thing is that I do questions really, really quickly. But then, so if they're really easy, it's because the ACT is the questions are easier, but there's a lot less time for it. But that suits me because I do questions really quickly. So I had a lot of time on the SATs, which I didn't use wisely. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do the ACTs. And then it went really well. So that's my advice.
And they have science
Yeah.
There's a science
The science section,
section.
I mean, the science section is just draft reading comprehension. Yeah.
But perhaps for others who may have
Or
the,
you don't have your background.
who doesn't have your background, right? They may the SAT may suit you better. So you can see, yeah. Go ahead.
Actually, I took an SAT practice test and I thought I would never take this test. And then I took 3 SATs without any sign of improvement. And then I was like, oh, maybe I have to go back to the ACT. And then I did go back to the ACT and I only did it once and it was good enough for me. So, you know, it was good enough. So basically, you know, one test cannot like sort of determine if that test is right for you. You kind of have to go do a lot of soul searching for the right test. But you know, I never thought the ACT was right for me because I was like, the science section, no way, like I can't do that. But somehow, like, I don't know, I don't know what happened, but you know, you just have to be okay with switching back and forth to experiment between the 2 tests. Yeah.
Adding on to their points, I tried both tests, and unlike Daisy, that graph section was definitely not for me. So I was like, okay, I'm stuck with the SAT then. So I did the SAT 4 times. I went to Asia Expo, everything like that. Oh, that was hectic. But my recommendation would just be like, keep practicing. Like, there's no other way to improve than just keep doing all these past papers because this test is so long. And I would never go back, but I hope you guys could, yeah, just keep practicing and you'll probably get it eventually.
Thank you for sharing this painful experience. I think Braden said that his advice was also take the ACTs. But what did I want to say? Oh, COVID. Yes. So obviously during COVID, many schools became test optional. So I wanted to ask Karen and Min whether either of them have anything to say about how to manage that.
I think we share the same answer,
Okay.
which is that it's not optional.
For international.
For internet, I mean, because you know these tests are available in Hong Kong. So if you're in a region of the world, you know, where COVID is still raging and the tests are not available to you, then it's probably more realistic that they're optional. But from our experience with the students that we work with, they're all taking it, and they're all, you know, many of them are doing well. So that's why if everybody from your school is submitting a test but you're not, then it would be questionable, right? Why didn't you submit when everybody else in your school could submit a score? Yeah.
There was anything? Okay.
No, these were the same as what we've already asked.
Yeah. I think there was questions that came in before, which I've written down as well, but I will take some from the audience. Would you like to ask a question?
I'm okay.
No worries, no worries. So a question sent in earlier was about what aspects of musical instrument skills and sports really matter to college admissions. So this is maybe more a question for counselors, but if you guys want to share, because you do have music and athletic talent, please talk about how you presented that. Yeah, I have some thoughts on that, but I'll let other people speak first. Okay, you go.
Yeah, okay.
Do you want me to go first?
I'll be very quick.
Yeah,
Which is, of course, music and sports both help to show. Okay, for the US in particular, it helps. Again, for the UK, it matters a little bit less, but the US wants someone who is holistic and well-rounded, right? So now, to what level you're doing them, that is the question. So if you are studying something related to music, obviously you have to do it at a very high level. If you're applying to the competitive colleges, one of your extracurriculars should be done at a very, very high level. It doesn't have to be music. It doesn't have to be sport. You know, you could be in the circuit, but you know, circus, but doing it at a very high level. It doesn't matter. But at least one of your extracurriculars has to be at a sort of very, very high level.
So one thing I do want to add is if you are an artist and you want to submit an art portfolio, know that the people who are submitting are probably already very talented. So I would ask, and that's what I'm asking of my students right now, is to think about what inspires you and what your style is, so that you're not just thinking about, oh, I'm a good singer, or I'm a good painter, or I'm really good at sculpture, but Rodin really inspired me because when I look at his work and what he adds to it, it's, I mean, I'm not an artist, so I can't really talk about it, but it's who are the artists that inspire you? Who are your contemporaries that inspire you? And what is your style? So defining those things will make you stand out from all the other talented artists out there. And I don't know if you wanted to add something, Ethan?
Yeah, I think the summer is a really, really good time to show depth if you want to show musical or artistic or athletic skill. Just because by devoting a huge chunk of your time in the summer shows that you're interested in a real deep dive of the actual instrument or the sport. So for example, at 2 years ago, I went to a music camp called Tanglewood, which is hosted by the Boston Symphony. And it's basically like in the middle of the woods, you just play music for 6 weeks. That's all you do in an orchestra. No internet. You sleep in a cabin, and that was all we did. Like we played music and we went to concerts and we had ice cream for 6 weeks, and it was amazing. And no aircon in the cabins, and that's just all we did. And it was one of the best 6 weeks of my life. And if you can find activities like that show depth and show that you've really taken the time, your own free time, which is the summer, to develop those interests and to meet like-minded people in those disciplines, I think that provides a really convincing case. Yeah.
So what I wanted to say about this question was that think about two aspects. One is how that sport or skill or music pursuit benefited you as a person. So that relates to what Min was saying about the holistic aspect. So even whether or not you are accomplishing in it, when you're presenting it, it should not just be merely as an accomplishment, but there should be some way in which, even if you only have 50 characters in the Common App description of that activity, you're talking about the impact that you made on others and how it helped you grow. And then the second aspect is whether, especially if you are not super accomplished in that area, how you combined it with other things like leadership skills, entrepreneurial interest, or service. So whether it's doing a charity concert or combining it with your interest in environmental science, there are other ways in which the musical, artistic, and athletic talents, like coaching other kids, that show who you are as a person. And then another question came in related to this, which is that what does at a very high level mean? Like for an instrument, would it be about grade 8? Or for sports, is being in the school team good enough? So actually, objectively speaking, some colleges, not every, but college admissions do rank different levels of accomplishment. Like at Stanford, there's like 6 points. At different universities, they have different systems, but roughly there's usually about 5, or at the very least 3 bands of accomplishment. And an easy way to think about it, I mean, you would do it the same way if you were them. Basically, there's your 1%, the top of the world, that's usually international, national level of accomplishment. Olympian, yes, a very appropriate, yes, perfect example, Olympic levels. And then you have your regional or citywide level. Then you have your within your school, that level. And I think that's in terms of measuring it externally, the external validation. And going back to that, you really have to think of ways to validate your own skills or what you say is your strength. So joining competitions, doing research, research papers, projects, these are all ways to demonstrate your skill. Certainly, competition, certifications, participation in sports and teams, that's another way. And so if you don't do anything with your skill, then it's very hard to demonstrate and to prove, substantiate your skill. So whether or not you're very good at it, think of creative ways to substantiate. Any other questions? You had a question, Min.
I had a question.
Please.
If I may. But any others from the floor before?
A little bit of follow-up to
Yeah, of course.
Maybe to the counselor. So I've been encountering a bit of that, while especially while selecting the schools, because my first question was about future career opportunities, right? Because, for example, if you want to do business, and would it make sense to, for example, sacrifice name value for, I guess, better career opportunities? Because, for example, if you go to NYU, right, which is by all means not a very, very top school.
It is a top school.
It is a very top school.
It's not like Harvard, Stanford.
Okay.
Okay.
This is a very controversial area you're entering.
Sort of listing, right? Although you said the listing is
Sure.
a bit sort of rubbish, but we can toss that out. Would it sort of make sense to, for example, be like a Princeton graduate rather than like an NYU graduate? Although if you're in NYU, you have significantly greater chance of getting an internship, a summer internship at Wall Street, for example, because it's so close, right? And that's one of the important decisions. I've made a decision here. But one of the important choices I'm facing now, I guess, is to sort of balance the sort of life after university with life in university.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's
Well, I have since you said it's direct to the council, first let me repeat the question in case the online audience couldn't hear. So the question is about the choice if you were to have to weigh choosing a more maybe highly ranked school, more prestigious school that may not have such clear career outcomes because they're not specialized versus a school that may not be as highly ranked but has very strong connections in terms of your industry or career. And I think that, examples aside, one thing that I think about when you say life after college, I mean, 2 years ago when we were going through the admissions process, I don't think any of us could have predicted what was to come the next 2 years. So first of all, I think the future is highly unpredictable. So making decisions with that in mind, with that high volatility, high uncertainty, you don't know where you'll be working. You don't know where, even the industry that you've chosen may change significantly. That is one argument to be made for going to schools that have not necessarily more prestige, but that you feel will develop you as a whole person, where you'll be happier and has opportunities, whether it's in the classroom or outside, to grow, and that you'll be happier in. So I think being happy in a school is very important, because if you choose a place but you think of it as a bitter pill to swallow so that you can get more job opportunities, that would be a bit of a red flag to me. But if you think that it's good and but the only thing is it's not as highly ranked, then I think if you think you can thrive there and it will offer you those opportunities, that's a great reason to go. And yeah, but I think in general, for the very selective schools, they all obviously have strong alumni network in almost every conceivable field. And since it's unpredictable anyways, and half the fields you'll be in haven't been invented, I think that's, sure, you can say that's safer. But yeah, so I think that you still have to think about whether you're going to be happy and able to thrive in the places that you're going to.
Okay, so I have a few thoughts on this. First of all, read the book of Frank Bruni, Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be. It's a great book for you to understand that your university doesn't define you. And he goes to describe how a lot of these lesser known schools may have honors programs where there are smaller classes, you have direct contact with professors, and these professors are the ones that inspire you to do great things. And I think that is certainly one thing to consider when you're doing your school research. That are there honors programs, are there seminar style classes? Those are all important considerations. Secondly, I think in this day and age, job prospects do matter. You go to a highly selective university with high caliber individuals, you just upped your competition to get the top jobs. So not everyone who goes to Harvard is going to McKinsey and Goldman Sachs. They're still going to filter through, your grades still matter. So go to a place where you will thrive. I think I've said that a few times already. And then another thing is, your citizenship also matters. So if you go to a US university and you're looking for your next job and they're not hiring US citizens, then you've just shot yourself in the foot. So, you know, there are some excellent programs in Hong Kong. HKUST's business program is fantastic. You're right in the city. Well, I mean, a little far, but great externship opportunities, great networks, great connections. So if you're looking beyond college, and you know, it's always nice to have that foresight, you can certainly consider those as an option.
Such great advice. Thank you. And Min too, please.
So, you know, I went to a school that would be considered prestigious when I went to Yale, but I have, you know, sorry, hope I didn't say something wrong. But you know, I have friends who you could say did not thrive professionally, and at the same time, I know many people who didn't go to a brand name school who have far outdone us. So it really does not matter where you go. It matters more what you do where you go, like what you do when you get there, right? And that will propel you to wherever you want to be in the future.
Yeah, no, this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. And you know, some of you may know we're building a school, Bloom Academy. And one of the reasons I'm building this school is because of my experience going to very good schools. I mean, I went to St. Paul's boarding school, went to Harvard undergrad, I went to Cambridge. So these are prestigious schools. And at the same time, like Min, I definitely met many people there who didn't know what they wanted to do or had, you know, thought they knew what they wanted, but it was because what the world told them they should do. And then later on in life, were not very happy. And I wanted to not contradict, but to say, Karen said that where you go doesn't, or you were saying the book said, Frank Bruni said, where you go doesn't define who you are. But actually, in some ways, in a perhaps negative way, it can. So going to these schools where people are just like, oh, you're a Harvard grad. All they see is that, right? When you're many other things, just like, you know, I totally empathize with not wanting to be labeled. I mean, in a way, it's a giant label that you're putting on your head. And do you really want that? I think people don't really think about the cost of going to these schools.
I had one employer who said that, you know, that the employer actually didn't consider me because of my school, because the employer thought that I'd be, you know, diva, you know, like difficult to deal with for that reason. Yeah. I mean, this employer hired me in the end, but told me that she had this worry, this concern.
Well, yeah. So no, I mean, and what Karen was saying, like, you know, sometimes you can get in, but is that the best fit for you? Are you really going to be happy there? Yes, please.
I've had enough of him not asking questions.
Take over. Would you like to speak to the mic, actually, if you don't mind?
So his elder brother just graduated from Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. So, but literally from ESF, he went to West Island School. He was the only one, because everybody, whoever went, I think there were 5 of them going to Georgetown that year, were from HKIS, because this is English School Foundation. So they're more about UK education. Right? So Namir is doing about the same thing. Like he's going to English school West Island, but he's probably going to go to the US. I feel it's additional pressure on him, plus the pressure of doing as well, if not better than his brother. And then the little one, his younger brother, also will be under pressure to do well, right? Do you feel it's additional pressure on your siblings, guys, whoever has, to do equally well, or is it additional pressure, or it's actually good inspiration? That's my question.
Thank you. Such an honest and good question. Okay, please, anybody who has, oh, Kimberly, you have a sibling. You have a twin. Kimberly is a twin.
The other 3 are single children.
So I have a twin. She's going to Princeton. I'm going to Brown. I have a younger brother who's probably watching. I would say, I'm not sure if he himself feels pressure. I think he has mentioned that he does feel some pressure, because during the past year when me and my sister were talking about college, that's probably all we ever talked about during family dinners. And he was always there. So sometimes he would just be like, okay, I don't want to listen. I'm just going to go to my room. And then I do feel bad for him sometimes. But I think he's quite independent. So I think he'll do fine on his own, even though my parents, I'm not sure if they have high expectations for him. I'm not sure, but I hope they don't, and I hope they'll just like let him figure out his own way, because like I think he says he doesn't want to like follow in our footsteps. Like he's never been to the same school me and my sister have been to, so I think he'll do fine on his own, and I think he's not as pressured so far. He's like 15, like about that age to like think about college, but should be okay. Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I have a younger sister and she's 13. Basically, she's gone to all the same schools I went to. So there is a bit of, it can get challenging when, people refer to her, oh, you're so-and-so's sister. And I've not really addressed this with her, but I can understand how it is a very hard issue when, you are just referred to someone's sibling and not as your own person. So I think that not to give like parenting advice, but like I think like for the similar parenting advice. I think you just have to cultivate them as a completely different person, and that she shares so many similar interests with me. She also plays the same instruments as I do. She grew up doing ballet, which is something I approached much later in life. But ultimately, what that extracurricular activity means to her will be something wholly different than what it means to me. How I write about dance and music will be so different from how she writes about that. And the priorities she will develop, because she's only 13, and she will grow into this wholly different person than I do. So on an external surface, she might look very similar to me, but like I feel like the college process is so much about cultivating what your internal landscape looks like where your priorities lie. And it's your external, your background details only take up so many pages of the Common App. It takes up 3 or 4 pages. Then you have your essays and so much that is all about what goes on inside your head that is not often shared about. So I really encourage people who feel like they have to live under the pressure of someone's sibling to nourish that part, that internal part, your thoughts, because that's what's going to set you apart from the external successes of your older sibling. Yeah.
You're so articulate. I don't think I could have answered it better. Thank you. Oh, yes. Sure, please, Jacqueline.
First of all, I just want to say that you're all very eloquent. And thank you so much for your time today. I'm sitting here, thinking in all of this. My own son will be going through this, I guess, in 6 years' time.
Good to be prepared.
I'm just a little curious, at what age did you start to think about the college process? Because I kind of imagine him 6 years later, paying myself.
Okay, so we have that question and one last question from online. So when do you start preparing and thinking about this?
Perhaps very quickly down the line.
Started. I started sort of thinking oh God, what am I doing in college in 8th, 9th grade? Didn't act on it until about 11th grade.
Yeah.
I really started thinking about it in the summer of the 11th grade. That was basically when I got my counselor. So I think that it's great to to start so early, and I'm sure your son will be going places. But sometimes this thing, even though I just realized I wanted to go to the U.S. Maybe 2 years ago, and obviously this stuff will young people, they change their mind all the time. So I don't think anything should be set too much in stone.
All right, I probably started thinking about it after I did my GCSEs, because year 10, year 11, end of the road, it's GCSEs, and then year 12, year 13, end of the road, it's college. But then, so I started thinking about it after year 11, so that would be year 12. But also, another thing I want to point out is when you're in year 13, last year of high school, you probably think the end of the road is college, that's the end point. But then actually, it's so much more. That your whole life is ahead of you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I so agree. But basically, referring to your question, I started sophomore year when I was, began to have some ideas and I was begin to carefully plan out my summer. But junior year is when the pressure really sets in because that's when you begin doing your SATs, ACTs, APs, all of that. So it would be wise to start thinking about that. I think this at the beginning of your sophomore year, I think is a good time to begin planning. Yeah.
Thank you. And in terms of our work with students and guidance, I think usually right before their sophomore year is a good time to start. Some people start earlier, but I think if you start before sophomore year in terms of course selections, the test prep planning, because sometimes you do APs earlier and SATs as well, that can happen in the summers. You really only have a couple of summers to plan. So as counselors, we do prefer to work with kids earlier, not too early, not too intensively until the final stretch, which is about June of junior year, or like even the summer when you're a rising senior. Okay, so last question, a very good question from online. How did you find out about what you wanted to write about on the Why Us essay? So just to give a bit of context, that's a supplemental essay that almost every single school asks. Why blank school? And what did you do to set your Why Us essay apart from other applicants? You got to maybe think back a bit. Great.
As I mentioned before, I pretty much combed through, because I have, at least when I was applying to college, I had a very specific sort of interest that I had mine. And so I combed through every department's page and I would look at like, okay, what research is this professor doing? Am I interested in this? And so that was definitely something I tried to incorporate in. And also looking at sort of basically just browse their website for like a couple hours and you'll find something really cool. Yeah. And also I tried to look at sort of student reviews, the publications they put out, how they describe themselves, how other people describe the college, and get like a sort of idea of like, okay, what is their like brand they're trying to sell? What's their core identity? Like, do they sell themselves as like, we're super good at engineering, please come to us for that? Or are they more like, you can try everything here, we want well-rounded kids, and sort of try to fit my own narrative to fit sort of like what they wanted. And it's also a good chance to see like, if you're really, really struggling to write the Why Us essay and you're like, God, I don't like this school, don't apply. That happened to me. And then I was like, midway through writing the essay, I was like, why am I applying to this school? I don't like it. Like, don't do that to yourself.
Thank you for being honest.
I think the why is, obviously, Daisy's talked about to go on the school's website, know a lot about the school. But another thing I say people overlook in the why's essay is to talk about a bit about yourself. It gives you, the Common App doesn't have the room for you to mention all your activities. So sometimes me and Karen will sneak some of our stuff into the why's essays, and remember to link why what you've done is important to the school and how it will help the school. Because, US colleges, they want fame, they want reputation. If you can contribute to that school, what you uniquely bring to the table and how it fits them so seamlessly, they'll love it, they'll buy it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree with Brayden. I kind of forgot, sorry, what I wrote, because that was 2 years ago actually. But I think, yeah, you gotta link yourself into this essay, and also like definitely put in some like extracurriculars that this university has to offer.
Like a TED talk, and then the professor, and there was a link to the professor.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And the courses that you like.
Yeah, put in some courses, put in some activities that you would like to do at school. And also if you find some like talk or like article that you find interesting, that you could link in with the specific courses or extracurricular activities, that'd be great.
I think for me, the more niche you are, the better it is. What I mean is the more specific you can get with the school, the better it is. So what I wrote for one of the schools is I wrote about why I loved their trapeze club, and why it was like amazing and nothing I ever seen before, and how that was reflected in the diversity of their curriculum and the diversity of the student body, and how that school also did not have a core curriculum or like a set amount of classes. So, and for another school, I remember I went through their course catalog and I found, oh wait, this playwright I love is teaching here. And so I looked at his courses, and then I talked about how those courses are related to my own interests. So the more detailed you can get, finding out the specific clubs, the specific student bodies you can fit into, the professors you want to meet and have coffee with, that shows that you have a really, really deep understanding of the school. That will make you stand out.
Yes, I definitely want to add to this. This is also good for job hunting as well. They want you to want them. So it's kind of like dating, right? You want to show that you like them and they're showing that they like you. So you have to show, why do I want you and why do you want me? And so it's why me plus why you equals the why us essay. So think of it in that sense. And also with job hunting too, research the company. And instead of just talking about yourself, talk about why you want to join the company too.
To wrap up? Okay, well, thank you so much to everyone in the audience for sitting through this whole 90-minute sharing. But really, I'm so happy to just see all of you back here and to see what wonderful, amazing people you've become even in just the past year. I'm actually like filled with pride and like joy that you guys have learn so much from the process of applying. And it hopefully for some of you who've taken a gap year, this is like a bit of a warm up to getting back into the college mode again and reflecting on this path that you've walked. And it's also, we didn't get to share much about, how our counseling worked, but one thing that I love about being a counselor is just the privilege of getting to know another person really well and to write all these essays and explore their passion. It's not just a cliche phrase, but it really is an honor to be able to do that. And if you can see it that way, hopefully this message is coming across, that the path is different for everyone, that how you see this journey matters a lot to how you experience it. And if you have people around you supporting you who also share that, and parents, you guys play a very important role. Most of you here are parents, and be careful with your words, the pressure you're putting on your kids, and also ways in which you can support them. Sometimes supporting them isn't doing the research for them, but being there to listen to them process the research that they've done, to be the ear and not the mouth or the hand. So anyways, that's our approach too. But we want to thank you and hopefully enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And if you want to learn more about admissions and our process, feel free to reach out to us at Baker and Bloom. Thank you very much.
And for the live audience, we'll stick around.
Yes.
So you have